Keyboards, which ones are better for you? There are a whole lot of options. You have hardware versus software and everything in between. I actually transitioned over from having hardware to software. Actually, I use a combination of the two. So when you go to get a keyboard and when you're looking at using keyboards and incorporating them into your actual music, what are some of the things you are to look for? What can you find? So let's discuss. I'm Chris Moses, and this is Gospel Progressions University. This is video number 2 in this series on music and technology. This is a recap of what we spoke about last time. In the first video, we spoke about plugins. What a plugin is software that works within another piece of software in order to manipulate sound. We spoke about VST. VST stands for Virtual Studio Technology, and what that is just software that is a plugin. It could be a plugin that's used with other software to actually allow you to be able to record using the software version of what exists in the hardware world. VSTi is another extension of that. VSTi stands for Virtual Studio Technology Instruments. So now this allows you to use the same real life instrument you would use, but there are software versions of it that you can actually play back with a MIDI enabled keyboard. And I'll explain what MIDI is in this video. And we spoke about DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation. A DAW is software that is used to record, manipulate, capture, and process audio. So if you want to find out more about that video, I'm going to leave a card over here. You can just check that out and click on that. So let's talk about keyboards, the type of keyboards that we have. And what I'm going to name are all keyboards: acoustic piano, electromechanical keyboards, digital pianos, stage pianos, workstations, and I would throw this in there, a VSTi software plugin. These are all keyboards. All of them are keyboards. You have an acoustic piano, which is a keyboard, except that all of these are keyboards, but they're all not each other. Although all acoustic pianos are keyboards, not all keyboards are acoustic pianos. All stage pianos are keyboards. Not all keyboards are stage pianos, and so on. So you have several different categories I'm talking about. So, of course, you have your acoustic piano, which is like a grand piano, Steinway and Sons. Electrical mechanical instruments were things like a Hammond B3, Wurlitzer piano, or Rhodes piano, suitcase piano. The digital pianos now are keyboards as well, but these now incorporate the concept of having an acoustic piano kind of feel as far as the keys and sometimes even the size. A stage piano is more of a professional grade or professional level piano that is going to be played on a stage, like a Nord Stage 3, keyboards that are made by Roland, by Yamaha, and those bigger name keyboard companies. Typically, they won't have speakers, period. And they're more expensive, a lot more expensive than the entry level, say, digital pianos. You just have a line output. It's called a line output with a very hot or loud signal. These are typically used to amplify sound. So the main difference between a stage piano is that, of course, it's not played in the home typically, or can be, but it's more designed for the stage, and they're going to have a lot less sounds than a digital piano would have. A digital piano would have, a clavinet sound, several digital or electrical keyboard sounds, maybe some organ sounds, some other old school the clavinet, or we would call a harpsichord sound, where a stage piano would have a bank of piano sounds or some string sounds, but more focused around piano sounds. Now, with a workstation is another type of keyboard where you're going to have even more sounds. Then you're going to have other parameters where you can actually manipulate the sound. Then you're going to have inside of it, most likely, some type of effects processor like reverb and chorus, and you could even probably do some sampling on it and some synthesis, synthesizing sounds and things like that. And it actually has an area on it called a transport, where you could record and play back and edit music. Basically, it's a workstation if you're working on music to produce, create, and to edit music. All the music that I play, or every sound that you hear, anytime you hear them in videos that I make and tutorials, are triggered by MIDI events or MIDI messages. So what is MIDI, or MIDI 1.0? So what MIDI stands for, MIDI is Musical Instrument Digital Interface. it allows instruments and computers to interface with one another. All you need for to have a MIDI connection is a MIDI cable. It has 5 pins in it, or a USB cable, and you'll see in and out. And what that means is that you're sending messages, and you can also receive messages from other computers or devices or keyboards. There are 16 channels over this one wire. So the 16 channels, you can have 16 different instruments. So when you send a MIDI event, you can select which channel you want to send. Say you have one event you want to send you want to make a sound, an A, off of a particular instrument, say a VSTi or some sound that you may have on another keyboard. Because there are 2 places. You can play back samples on the computer, sending MIDI messages, or you can play back from another keyboard. Like if I connected my dumb MIDI controller, because I have no sounds in it, this Hammer, what is it, M Audio Hammer 88, if I connected it to, say, Roland Phantom, well, it would play back the Roland Phantom sounds, but I'm not touching the Roland Phantom. That's how that would work. Well, it's the same thing. I can have the Roland Phantom as a VSTi version on my computer, and it'll do the exact same thing with the exact same sounds that were sampled from the original Roland. So over these 16 channels, you have messages that you can send. Like I said, you can tell it which channel to send to, which note. You could also, the messages that are also on there are how fast, the attack, if I'm playing it fast or slow. That'll give the timbre of the sound. Like a hard sound will give a hard, my keyboard's not on, will give a hard piano sound, or something that's soft will give, of course, a softer attack, a softer piano sound. It also sends messages of when I played it. So of course it can sequence those notes. If I'm playing a piece of music, it doesn't just go all at one time, because that would be a cacophony of noise, but it does the different timings. If I'm playing it at a certain time or a certain tempo, it records that as well. So we have our VSTis. In general, there are 2 flavors or 2 types of VSTis. You have the standalone versions that work independent of being plugged into software. And then you have the ones that work in tandem with software, as in a sample player, something like Native Instruments Kontakt player, for example. There are advantages to using VSTis. For example, I have many keyboard instruments and many other instruments just on a physically small solid-state drive. I can take it anywhere I go. All I would need is my laptop and a MIDI controller. When I'm setting up to play, I would use a sample player like Native Instruments Kontakt, because I want to layer other sounds. Sometimes I want to play another sound that I would have in the library and pull it up quickly. If I had a standalone for each one, I'd have to look for the other software and then wait for that to open and wait for those samples to load, because the samples have to load in virtual instruments. And so that may take some time. When I can map out particular parts of my hardware, for example, I want a knob, or say I wanted a modulation wheel to access strings, or some volume pedal, or some kind of hardware, or some piece of hardware to trigger something else, well, it's ready available to me. The thing is, though, that you may have a bit of a distraction, because if you have a large library of instruments, virtual instruments, in the Kontakt player, it can be a bit distracting depending on how you think. Quite often, I would use a plugin like Omnisphere Keyscape, because it works like a sample player. You can actually layer your sounds, and it has different effect units, so you can sculpt your own sound and come up with your own original and unique sound. The way you would input sound into your computer is using or utilizing a MIDI keyboard, like what I have here, my Hammer 88, or I can use any modern keyboard to actually put MIDI, or to send MIDI information and MIDI messages to my computer to trigger these samples. I have a V drum set that I can actually use to connect to my computer via USB, and I would trigger samples or drum samples on there. Typically, if you were playing just drums on your computer, you would use the standalone by Tune Tracks. I have that. It's called Superior Drummer. So I connect my drums, and then I would play certain parts, and it would trigger certain parts. I can map them anywhere I want, because again, they're not sounds, they're MIDI messages. So how do these things actually work in real life? How would we actually implement something like this? What is my workflow? If I'm at a church service or some kind of venue, wherever I would be, how would I use this in a performance setting? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. If you've enjoyed this video so far and you want to learn a little bit more about how to incorporate technology into your music, head on over to mychurchband.com/jumpstart. I'll leave the link in the description. I'll go ahead and I'll give you a jump start on what exactly you need to purchase, the kind of computer you need to buy, the keyboard you can actually start out with, and how you can go ahead right now and incorporate technology into your music. God bless you, and I will see you in the next video.